In this video, I will be discussing how to review, use operations, and factor polynomials. The combination of adding and subtracting algebraic expressions is called a polynomial. You could have one term, two terms, three terms, 7 terms, 100 terms. A polynomial is a combination of adding and subtracting any of those. The degree of a polynomial is the highest exponent. So for example, in this polynomial, the 4 is the highest exponent, and so that would be considered the degree of that polynomial. The coefficients of a polynomial is the number in front of each of the variables. So for example, in 3x to the 4th, the 3 would be considered the coefficient. 7x squared, the coefficient would be the number 7. Now you can add and subtract and multiply and divide by polynomials. So in this case, to simplify, we are first going to need to multiply or distribute this -7 to each of the terms. So in the front, we would have 5x cubed minus 6x squared plus 1, and then -7 times x cubed would be -7x cubed. -7 times a -2 turns to a positive 14x squared, and then -7 times x would be a -7x. Now you're looking for any of the terms that you can combine. I have a -6x squared and a positive 14x squared. I also have a 5x cubed and a -7x cubed. So I'm going to go ahead and combine the highest first. 5x cubed and -7x cubed will give me a -2x cubed. And then a -6 and a positive 14 would give me a positive 8x squared. You keep the variable. The x squared stays x squared. You do not add x squared and x squared to get x to the 4th. Do not do that. And then this is the only x value, so it would be -7x. And then a positive 1 is alone. There is no other constants in order to combine. And so this would be your final answer. Again, x cubed and x cubed does not become x to the 6th. That only happens when you multiply variables together. When you add variables, you keep the variable with the exponent. In this case, when multiplying, this is where you would use the FOIL method. So you're going to multiply 3x times both terms. So 3x times 5x will give you 15x squared. This is where it becomes x squared because you're multiplying. 3x times 4 will give you 12x. -2 times 5 will give you a -10x. And -2 times 4 gives you a -8. Again, combine like terms. You have a positive 12 and a -10. 15x squared was your only term that had an x squared in it. 12 and 10 give you a positive 2x, and then you have a -8. Factoring polynomials, the first step is always look for anything that is in common. So for example, I have a 3 that's a constant that is in common, so I can pull a 3 out front. I can factor it out front. And then you look at your variables. I have an x to the 7th and I have an x squared, which means I can pull out an x squared. When I do that, 3 times 1 will give me 3 because I pulled the whole 3 out, so I'm left with a 1. And then x squared times what gives me x to the 7th? It is x to the 5th, because remember, when you multiply, you add exponents. 2 plus what gave me 7? The answer is 5. And then 3 times what gives me 12? It's 4. And then I pulled out the entire x squared, so I do not have anything left other than the 4. So this is how you would completely be able to factor this polynomial. In this case, this looks a little different. If you notice, in the first term and the second term, do you notice anything in common? And the answer is yes. Both of them actually have an x minus 2 in common. So if I pull out an x minus 2, what am I left with? Well, I pulled out the x minus 2, so I'm left with the 4x. And then in this term, I pull out the x minus 2, which means I'm left with a 3. And that actually becomes our final answer. We pulled the entire x minus 2 expression out, and we're left with a 4x plus 3. Now, when you factor polynomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, when the coefficient is 1, this is where you do the big X. What multiplies to get me 12, and what add or subtracts to get me a -7. And so the answer would be -4 and -3, because -4 times -3 gives you a +12, but when you add them, you get a -7. So therefore, your factors would be x minus 4 and x minus 3. In this case, when you do the big X, the outside term, -22, is what is multiplied to get that. And then the inside term is what adds or subtracts to get -9. So what two terms multiply to give you -22, but they add or subtract to give you -9? And the answer is -11 and a +2. The negative has to go with the 11 because when you subtract, you have to get a -9. So your factors would be x minus 11 and x plus 2. Now, when the leading coefficient is not 1, so for example, we actually have a number in front of the x squared, just like here we have a number in front of the x squared here. This is where we do the form, which we call the illegal move. So first step, you multiply the a times c. So for the first step, you multiply the 2 times the -15 to get -30. Now you do the big X. What multiplies to give me a -30 and adds or subtracts to give me my inside number, which in this case is a 1. What multiplies to give you -30 but adds to give you 1? The answer is going to be 6 and then -5. Because 6 times -5 is -30, but 6 minus 5 is a +1. So we are going to write our factors just like normal. X plus 6, x minus 5. Here is where we do the second step. Step 2, where we multiplied by 2 to get -30, we now divide by 2. And so when we do that, we get x plus 6, x minus 5, but we are now going to divide our constants by 2. Now we're going to simplify. If we simplified this, this would give me x plus 3. This does not simplify. 5 divided by 2 does not simplify, so we actually put the 2 in front of the x, and that is our factors, x plus 3 and 2x minus 5. So in this case, the first thing we do is we multiply 5 times a -6 to get -30, and we do our big X. So what multiplies to give you -30 but adds or subtracts to give me a +13? Let's see. I believe it's going to be 15 and 2. One of them needs to be negative since they multiply to give you a negative, but that's a +13. So therefore 2 needs to be negative. So we'll write x plus 15 and x minus 2. Now the second step, this is since we multiplied by 5 in the beginning, we are now going to divide by 5. So when we divide by 5, we divide by 5 by the constants. 15 divided by 5 is 3. You cannot divide 2 by 5. That's as simplified as it goes. So you're going to throw the 5 in front of the x, and those are your two factors, x plus 3 and 5x minus 2. Now, there's also special factors when factoring polynomials. For example, if you have a difference of 2 squares. For example, 9x to the 4th is actually a perfect square. What squared will give me 9x to the 4th? And that would be 3x squared. Because if you were to square it, 3 squared is 9, and x squared squared is 4. And then what squared will give me this? It will be 5y, because 5 squared gives me 25, and y squared gives me y squared. So when we use the formula x squared minus y squared equals x plus y, x minus y, if you can break it up into what the terms are that should be squared, the square and the square. So this right here is x, this represents the y. So your factors are going to be 3x squared minus 5y and 3x squared plus 5y. And if you ever want to know whether you factored it correctly, if you FOIL the two parentheses, it should get you back to 9x to the fourth minus 25y squared. There's also a sum or difference of cubes. So these are the formulas for finding the difference of the cubes. And so I need to figure out what value will make this first term cubed. So if I need to cube this, I need to figure out what cubed gives me 8. And the answer is 2 because 2 cubed is 8. And then what cubed will give me x cubed? And the answer is x. And then what cubed is going to give me the 27y cubed? And it's going to be 3 because 3 cubed is 27 in the by. So this represents my first expression. This represents my second expression. This is a plus, so we're going to use the top formula. So first I'll get x plus y, which means I will take 2x plus 3y to be my first factors. And then I will take my x value, which is the first parentheses, and I'm going to square it. So basically, if I write it out, it would be 2x squared minus 2x times 3y plus 3y squared. So the first parentheses does not change. The second parentheses, 2x quantity squared turns into 4x squared. 2 times 3 gives me a negative 6y. And then 3y squared gives me 9y squared. So let's review. If we were to completely factor this top expression, this top polynomial, the way we would do it is this is a difference of cubes. So what cubed minus what cubed will give me this expression? And the answer is 3x because 3 cubed is 27. And this would be 2y squared because y squared cubed is what gives you 6. Anytime you have a exponent on the outside of a parentheses, you would multiply the exponents. 2 times 3 is 6. So this represents my x. This represents my y. So I'm going to use the formula for the difference, which is going to be x minus y times x squared plus xy plus y squared. So this is my x. This represents my y. So it will be 3x minus 2y squared because the 2y squared is the term. And then it will be 3x squared, so I'm going to actually put the 3x and then square it, plus 3x times 2y squared, that represents my x times y, and then my y, which this represents my y, squared. So the final answer would be 3x minus 2y squared. 3x quantity squared is 9x squared. 3 times 2 is 6 xy squared. And then 2 squared, quantity squared will give you 4y to the fourth. And that's how you would factor a difference of cubes. In this term, if I notice, well, one thing I notice is that we have some things in common. There's a 3 that can go into all of these terms. So I'm going to factor out a 3. But I also notice that every term has an x. So I'm also going to factor out an x. When I do that, I am left with x squared minus 2x minus 3 because I pulled out one of my x's. That's why I have 2 x's left and then 1 x left, and then no x's because I pulled out the x. Now, you are not done because this alone also factors. It factors into 2 parentheses. So you would do the big X. What multiplies to give you negative 3 and then adds or subtracts to give you a negative 2? And the answer is negative 3 and a positive 1. So you will get x minus 3 and an x plus 1. And that is how you would completely factor this polynomial. The last one. There is nothing in common that I notice. This is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm going to have to do the illegal move And the reason is because I have a coefficient in front. So this is where I'm going to first multiply 4 times 15. So I will get a negative 60. So what multiplies to give me negative 60 adds or subtracts to give me a negative 4. The answer is, let's see, 10 and 6, because I can subtract one of them to get a negative 4. The 10 will need to be negative because I need a negative 4. So you will write the terms x minus 10, x plus 6, but there's one step left. Where we multiplied by 4 at the very beginning, we now have to divide by 4. So I'm going to divide this expression by 4, and I need to simplify. 10 divided by 4 simplifies into 5 halves. 6 divided by 4 simplifies into 3 halves. Now that they are simplified, now if there's any fraction, you need to throw it in front. So the 2 needs to be thrown in front, and this 2 needs to be thrown in front. So my final answer is going to be 2x minus 5. And this final answer is going to be 2x plus 3. And that is completely factored of that polynomial.